So, with Valve having popped out the Steam Deck and it doing relatively well, there have been other manufacturers kind of starting to look into it. Most notably, GPD and Ayaneo have both announced interest in Linux as an operating system for their handheld devices. GPD has gone the route of just wanting to do SteamOS on their systems, and they've talked to Valve saying, hey, we need a build for this. And Valve has already expressed interest in basically leaving SteamOS out for the public to use. So, of course, anyone with a handheld would be able to use it, and they're excited to be able to provide a way for other handheld manufacturers to put SteamOS on their own systems. So it's just them being able to have SteamOS on more of their systems, which isn't a big deal. It's Valve getting more Steam users via other people creating hardware. So it would basically be like the Steam Machine thing, except this time it's successful because for some reason, everybody likes to play their Steam games out and about, not just on their desktop, apparently. But yeah, so GPD is going the let's just rip SteamOS directly. So Ayaneo's approach, they pushed up an a launch announcement video for their crowdfunding for the Ayaneo Air. The Ayaneo Air is another one of those, like, initially built as a Windows handheld that you're typically used to from the likes of GPD and these other Chinese makers, except Ayaneo in their launch video, if I can scroll down to it, announced Ayaneo OS, which is built on Linux for those that don't know, that haven't heard about it at all. And basically, it's Aya Space built on Linux with more features in it because they're able to do that with Linux a bit easier than with Windows. They ran into some kinks with Windows, and they're like, this is ridiculous, and so we're going to build our own thing. So they actually go through all the specs here on their Indiegogo page, and it takes a bit before you hit to it, frame rate and all, and things like that. And then finally you come down to here, so they've implemented file management, hardware management, and things like that. In the launch video, they talked about how the dude talked about getting better performance under Ayaneo OS than under Windows. So basically, with Valve having done what they did with the Steam Deck and finding the optimizations, Ayaneo has gone with AMD, like Valve did, and has optimized a Linux kernel or Linux configuration for the hardware of the Ayaneo Air, and they're looking at releasing Ayaneo OS for other Ayaneo products, is what I'm assuming based on what was going on and the halfway badly translated English subtitles. So they are also open sourcing some of the front-end stuff for Ayaneo OS in the Aya space as well. So they're gonna, basically, they're taking advantage of that free contribution in order to make the Ayaneo Air better and the Ayaneo products perform better with the configuration. And of course, you can install Steam on it, so you can run your games on it and things like that. But of course, Valve was the first one. No one jumped on board with Linux after Valve moved Steam to Linux, or put Steam or Linux on the market for gaming. And as Valve has improved different things, they finally came out with their handheld, and now more handheld manufacturers are looking at it like, this is actually a viable option. Of course, Ayaneo OS's interface is proprietary, much like SteamOS's interface, but the handheld itself does have a lot of cool features to it. So fingerprint wake-up recognition. I kind of skimmed through the launch video towards the end where they started talking about Ayaneo OS, so I didn't really look at many of the hardware features. But this means that they've optimized everything for this handheld, and it talks about how in Windows, the difference between Windows and Linux is that they can achieve a virtual zero power drain standby state under Linux versus Windows is a low power state. And I mean, depending on how they do it, they probably have a state somewhere on the SSD to where they're putting the state, saving the state of the OS to it so that they can turn it off completely in standby and turn it back on. And then the quick boot up time and things like that, again, just factors of the operating system itself and the kernel that they're running. I mean, just like my cousin was confused when I put Linux on my SSD. It's like Linux will boot up just as quick on like the hard drive or whatever. It's like, why didn't you put Windows on it? Because Windows wasn't my priority. There is to it. The other thing that they were looking at is they wanted to get the best performance they could, and trying to tweak the NT kernel is not the same as trying to tweak the Linux kernel, because the NT kernel isn't exactly the most open thing, whereas the NT kernel isn't the most open thing, but the Linux kernel is more open for that configuration and gives you more options because it's right there in the open. So that's why their move to Ayaneo OS probably led to better performance of the Windows games under Proton. That's one of the things that they also pushed too, was like you can still play your Windows games under Ayaneo OS with Steam's Proton, and they specifically said that. So, of course, installing Steam, and they've got their own app store in the Aya space, apparently, where you can install different applications to include OBS. So, obviously, if you want to run your whole streaming setup off of the Ayaneo, you could, apparently. I probably wouldn't recommend it, but it's an option. But yeah, of course, the Aya Space interface that they have on Ayaneo OS would have more hardware configuration, like network configuration, connections, and file management and things like that, due to just having to build modules into the interface in order to interact with the underlying controls of the operating system environment is all. Since most of it is probably running command line stuff, you just create a graphical front end for it all to make it work. So it's pretty exciting. The Linux gaming handheld is more than just a Raspberry Pi now, because like hobbyists have been doing retro gaming handhelds with Linux for ages, but to see companies actually pick up on it is kind of exciting for a lot of people. And some companies are lazier than others, obviously. So, and they want Valve to do all the work for them to make it work when their hardware should pretty much already work with the Linux kernel. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, share the video. Algorithm really seems to like that, and it actually helps it get directly out to more people. And you can even join the chat and interact when I'm not online or what have you in Discord, Guilded, XMPP, and check out my streaming stuff. Links are all in the description places, and I will see you guys later.